Will's like, stay away from me, okay? How many of you want to get a new hobby? Thumbs up. Okay. How about focus more on appearance? If so, you got to flip your hair. Okay. Flip your hair. Okay. How many of you want to focus on relationships more? Smile. Okay. And if you'd like to cut down on cigarettes and alcohol, then just wave. We're going to pray for you and help you with that. Okay. How about, now this, Brad probably should come up here closer for me, and I forgot my phone. But if you would like to go on more dates, then give somebody your phone number. Brad, I'm giving you mine. I want to go on more dates with you. If you would like to focus less on appearance, roll your eyes. Okay, so here's the thing. Those 14 or 15 resolutions that I gave you, those, according to Patch.com, are the top resolutions for 2018 in the United States of America and the rest of the world. And those resolutions are thought to be the thing that will make us better. You know, resolutions are oftentimes looked to be solutions, aren't they? So we often think that if we just make a firm decision to do or to not do something, which, by the way, is, according to dictionary.com, the official definition of a resolution. If we make that resolution, we make that decision to do or not do something, that is going to be our solution. If I eat less, I'll be thinner. I'll have more friends. I'll look better. I'll be happier. If I spend less money and put it in the bank instead, I'm going to be happier, right? If I have a new job, I'm just going to like my life more. If I have a better relationship, if Brad takes me on more dates, I'm going to have more fun. Okay? So those resolutions, we look to them almost as solutions. The funny thing is that, do you realize that we probably all make resolutions, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think self-improvement is a great thing, isn't it? I think God expects us to look at ourselves and self-reflect and go, oh, how can I be better for you, God? I mean, those are great things to do. But resolutions in and of themselves are funny little things, because according to the Huffington Post and the University of Stratton, how many people do you think will keep their resolutions? 8% of people, and they said that's a very high number, and only if they have certain people or certain things in place will they keep those resolutions. 8% of people will keep their resolutions, and the rest of us, we fail. We just don't do them. Do you know that by February 1st, at least 80% of us will have given up on our resolutions completely? Nah, just go ahead and have the cheeseburger. Who cares? I didn't do it in January, so this cheeseburger's not keeping me, is not the only thing holding me back from thin, you know? So just go ahead and eat it. And we give up. And a lot of times we do that, they say, because we have too many resolutions, or they're too difficult for us, and we don't allow ourselves a good plan. We don't have good self-reflection. We don't have smart goals. We don't let ourselves stay focused on the end result. In fact, we get distracted by our small failures. So when I make those Buckeyes and I say I'm going to eat better, and I eat 3 of them, well, I usually eat them while I'm making them, and so then they don't count. Okay, just so you know, anything that you eat while you're cooking does not count in your calorie count. It's why that's the only time I eat usually. No, not really. But so if I eat those, then I look at that and go, oh man, I failed. Well, I might as well just do this. Or, well, I didn't get up and exercise today. I saw Lenny exercise and he was running. Oh, I feel better. You know? So we look at our small failures and we give up. You know, as I was reading that, I was and talking with Brad and just doing some different things and doing some self-reflection for myself, I began to look at, well, what are some reasons that we do that? What is better than that? And resolutions have some flaws. First of all, most of our resolutions, if you're honest, are self-centered, aren't they? Our resolutions are about us. They're motivated by self-improvement. They're motivated by self-gratification. They're motivated by the me kingdom, self-glorification. There's nothing wrong with taking care of ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with making improvements. But it really is about me. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. If I'm saying I'm going to eat better, it's not so it will help the church succeed more. It's so that I look better and, you know, I feel better. It's self-centered to some degree. My resolutions are dependent upon my own power as well. My resolutions are dependent upon what I can do. It's dependent on my circle of influence. And they're dependent upon my self-discipline, upon my self-perseverance, upon my determination and my interest. I'm only going to do the resolutions that I really like the best. Like the spending less money is a great resolution until I go to the mall. Okay? Then I'm not so interested in that resolution. So resolutions have these flaws. They're self-centered, they're dependent upon my own power, and you know what? Then they become disposable. I can toss them aside, can't I? Because I'm distracted by those small failures, because they're based upon my feelings. Well, I don't feel like being on a diet, so I'm going to eat the cheeseburger and French fries. Who can resist the cheese sticks at Arby's? I mean, really, you know? Like, that's just nonsense. I'm not doing that. So I don't feel it, so I'm just not doing it. In my self-reflection and my discussion with Brad, I started to look at those resolutions. What am I going to do for 2018 that's different than 2017, that's going to bring me different results? And what can I do? What can make me different and make me better and bring me peace and bring me joy and contentment? And I began to determine that it was prayer. You see, the solution is not in the resolution. The solution is prayer. Simply prayer. Wow. That just seems too easy, doesn't it? Prayer. So I started looking at it, and I started thinking about it, and I started looking at what prayer is. Prayer is a plea to God. It's a devout petition to God, or an object of worship. It's a spiritual communication with God, as in supplication, thanksgiving, adoration, or confession. Those are according to dictionary.com. But vocabulary.com, which is my favorite website for definitions, it's super fun. It says that it is something you say to God, silent or spoken. Silent or spoken. It addresses a deity. You beg, implore, or plead, appeal, or request earnestly. You see, prayer, the word prayer is a noun, but pray is a verb. And a person who prays is a prayer, and now you're a verb, not a noun. So if you're a verb, you got to act. You can't just sit around. A noun just sits there. So I can have a stack of prayers, but I have to act on them. I have to pray. And I got really excited about that. I like noun or verbs better than nouns. You probably can tell because I move all the time. But it is a communion. So I am communicating with God. And the coolest piece that came out of vocabulary.com, I haven't even shared with you yet. It says that prayer is to communicate intimately. Now, I don't know about you, but that's like a really awesome thing if you think about it. When Brad and I do go on a date and we have time to talk and just sit and communicate intimately, I love that. I love it when I can share with him my innermost feelings and thoughts, and I feel closer to him, and I think he me the same. You know, there's that intimate communication you share with another human being. And yet, I can be even more intimate with God because God knows my heart and my mind before I ever speak it. My communication with God can be silent or spoken, but I can communicate with God regularly and intimately. Communication isn't just me talking, it's me listening. I can hear God's word and what He has for me as I communicate about and with God. Prayer is intimate communication between God and me, between God and you. That brings solutions. That was pretty exciting to me when I started to think about it. You see, prayer serves specific purposes, and prayer brings transformation. How do I know that? Well, I know it through a number of reasons. First of all, I know it because of my own life. I know that when I came to God and I was broken and empty, when I had tried everything in the world of sin that I could to bring me peace and contentment, when I had put all of my stock in my marriage relationship and my children and was left empty and hurt and undone, and I came to God and confessed my sins, I know the transformation that He did in my heart. Psalms 147:3 says, He healed my broken heart and He bound up my wounds. You see, that through prayer occurred in my life. It was instant. When I stood up from that altar of prayer, when I confessed my sins to Jesus and asked Him to forgive me and to take away my sin, when I stood up from that altar, I found myself able to forgive where I had never been able to forgive. I found myself able to smile where I was not able to smile. I found myself strengthened to be able to work through difficulties that needed to be worked through. I found peace in my heart where there had been no peace, there had only been turmoil. My life was transformed in that instant, and it has never been the same. I know that God answers prayer and has specific purposes because of prayers that were prayed while I was growing up with my family. I learned about the benefits and the answers to prayer as I was growing up. From times when my family lived in Missouri and we lived in a parsonage that was over a condemned bar. You couldn't walk in the middle of the floor. If you did, you would fall through to the basement. Okay? And it was the bar in the basement. We had no food. The church had very little money, and we didn't have any food, and we didn't have any, my dad was the pastor, and so it was really tough times, very tough times. And I remember we ate grits day after day, and that's all we had, morning, noon, and night. No butter, no sugar, no milk on them, just a bowl of grits. And my mom would portion them out, and she still made us set the table, which I thought was stupid. But every night when we sat down, we have to eat grits again? Yeah. But God gave us grits. Isn't this an answer to prayer? Let's pray for tomorrow's meal. And we would pray. And it was about 3 or 4 days into that when somebody knocked on the door. And it was a lady from our church, and she said she needed something, and she just needed to stick milk in our refrigerator. And my mom was really embarrassed. Don't. And she opened the refrigerator, and Betty just stuck it in the refrigerator and shut the door and left. But when she did, she had seen the refrigerator. It was empty, completely. And my mom was embarrassed. She didn't say much. Betty went out and got some groceries and got some people in the church, and they brought us groceries. And she said to my dad, "Why didn't you tell us you were hungry?" And he said, "I didn't need to. God did." We prayed. It was an answer to prayer. I can remember moving to Willard, Ohio, and having braces on my teeth, that was a whole thing anyway. I never should have had braces, but I was a paper girl, and I made friends with the dentist. I didn't know he was a dentist, and he cleaned our teeth for the first time in my life, which was an answer to prayer for my mom. Then he worked it out that I got these braces, and my mom said when we moved to Willard, "I don't know if I'm going to have the gas money to take you there every week for your appointments." And we got to the dentist, and he said, "I don't know what is happening." And he started calling people in, and he said, "We're taking the braces off. You've only had them on like a month, but your teeth are straight. It makes no sense." And my mom said, "No, that was God. It makes every bit of sense." I couldn't afford it. I can remember my son, Aaron. I was directing a drama at church in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and my son Aaron got chickenpox and had gotten a chickenpox on his eye, and woke up one Sunday morning and he couldn't stand, and it was the day of the drama. He was almost 5 years old. He couldn't get the fork to his face. He couldn't stand. He couldn't walk. We took him to the hospital, and they said he had a brain tumor. And they rushed us to Children's Hospital, and I remember sitting in Children's Hospital, And I'd called back to the church because I was supposed to be at the drama, and I told the pastor, and they announced it, and unbeknownst to us, and they prayed in that church while Aaron was having his spinal tap. And I remember the nurse saying to me, "I've never seen a child do so well at a spinal tap. This is amazing." He did the spinal tap, and pretty soon they came back and they said, "No brain tumor." I believe that was God. He had post-infectious cerebrolitis. It was amazing. It was, difficult, but it was much better than the brain tumor. You see, I've seen the works and the benefit and the answers to prayers all through my life, and those are just a few samplings of them. I know that God answers prayer. I know it from the scriptures over and over again, from Abraham, when he was sacrificing Isaac because he was listening and obeying God, one of the hardest choices in his life, I am sure, and yet God provided a sacrificial lamb for him. You see, God never has anything in our life that he does not care about. From, "Oh Lord, you know where my keys are and I don't," to the big, really tough stuff. And I have, in 2018, I have to tell myself that. I have to remind myself that God has my children in his hands. And I can do what I can do, but God can do so much more. I have to remind myself in 2018 that God can take care of every ministry opportunity that's made available to me long before I could ever do anything with it. I have to remember that my finances are God's and my motives are God's, and I have to remember in 2018 that the best resolution I could ever make is to spend more time in prayer with God. John Wesley once said that the busier he got, the more time he needed to spend in prayer. Now, that sounds easy, doesn't it? The busier you get, the more time you spend in prayer. What was amazing to me is the story is that man got up very early in the morning, and he would pray for like 2 hours a day before he started his day. And as he got busier in this story, it was that he ended up getting up earlier because it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, I'm not that good. I couldn't do that. But we could. What would happen if we did? What would happen if we spent 15 minutes more in prayer than we do now? Prayer is the key element of solutions and resolutions and life and answers that we need. We cannot exist without prayer in a way that we will have peace and contentment. In the deepest, darkest moments of my life, in the most difficult storms that I've faced, when I have been a Christian and I have been able to go to God in prayer, I have had strength and peace and contentment amidst the storm. And as the ship rolled and as the waves blew, I knew that God was commanding the storm, and I did not have to worry. God allows us the privilege of going to him in communion, in intimate communion, so that we can pray and that we can have a resolution when there seems to be none. I want to do something today that's just a little bit different with you. I think that we have to recognize sometimes that our prayers, when we're truly in line with God, are providing him a way to see the desires of our hearts, which, by the way, he already knows, but he still asks us to tell him the desires of our hearts. But at the same time, to be able to do things in his will. And we have to recognize that sometimes the answers to our prayers aren't always what we want, or how we want them, or in the time we want them. But it doesn't mean that God isn't answering. It doesn't mean that God isn't working. You see, because success with God is not dependent on what we can do, but it's dependent upon what he can do. It's not dependent upon my feelings anymore. It's dependent upon my faith in God. I want to go through a few things with you, and I would like us to just spend some time as a church in prayer. You know, I think one of the most exciting stories in the Bible is in Acts chapter 2. And in Acts chapter 2, I don't know if you know this story, or excuse me, not Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 12, Peter was taken to prison. I believe they had already, King Herod had killed John, and then they were gonna take Peter to prison, and then Herod got such a kick out of all of the stuff that he did that was evil, that he decided that Peter would be kept in prison, and after the Passover, they would bring him to trial in front of the people and make him a big spectacle to kill him. It was gonna be glorious for Herod, he thought, which is sad, but it's how sin works, isn't it? And so King Herod took Peter and put him in chains, and he was in prison. And while he was in prison, the church began to pray. If you read Acts chapter 12, verse 5, the church prayed for his release. I'm going to open this up to this. And I apologize. Here, my Bible's probably too big for this little stand, but Acts chapter 12, verse 5 says, "So Peter was in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him." The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrist. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals," and Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and it went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Now, isn't that the coolest thing ever? I would never want somebody to be in prison, but I just think it's kind of cool how the church prayed earnestly and God answered that prayer. Can you imagine what God could do if we as a church began to pray for the chains of the people in this community who are bound by sin would be released? What would happen if we began as a church to take names and start praying specifically that God would release the bondage of drugs or alcohol or sexual pornography or other sins, lying and cheating? What if we began to pray for our community that the chains of sin would come undone, and we began to respond to that and began to meet people at their deepest, darkest needs? What would happen? As a church, I wonder, are we praying earnestly? Is it just something that crosses our mouth, or are we really pouring our hearts out, and are we really digging down deep so that people that we come in contact will really know the joy that Jesus can bring us, the depth of his love and his forgiving grace? See, these people prayed earnestly. I pray. But in 2018, I have to ask myself, am I praying earnestly? Do I mean it? Because if I mean it, it will mean change. It will mean that things won't stay the same. And I gotta tell you, you are probably like me. Sometimes we don't like change. Well, we have just always done it that way. Well, we're just always this group of people. Well, wait a minute. God says, pray earnestly, and things will change. You know, it's funny. I want to read a little bit more with you in this story because it's very interesting. Chapter 12, verse 11 says, "Then Peter came to himself and said, Now I know, without a doubt, that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. That's cool. They're having a house party of prayer. There's nothing better than that. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer the door. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." Oh my goodness, think about it. How many times do we do that? I have prayed and prayed for this person, and they came to the door. Okay, I'm gonna go over here and pray for these people. They're at the door. Are we opening our door? Are we recognizing the answer to prayer that God has given us? What would happen in our church if we did that? What would happen if we fervently and earnestly took to the Lord our concerns and people who are in bondage? And things began to happen. Would we walk away from it? Or would we recognize it as God's work? It's interesting what prayer can do and how oftentimes we limit what prayer can do in our lives. So today, I'm going to challenge you that we're going to start out as a church agreeing to pray earnestly. And I'm going to ask you in your heart to pray earnestly. And I'm going to ask you to pray earnestly not just today, but to make it a daily practice. We have, when we first moved here, I really felt like God was asking me to come and pray at the beginning during Sunday school and pray for our services. And I feel like that many people have joined me in that, several people. And I feel like God has moved in our services. But I feel God pushing that to another step. I can't just pray for our services here on Sunday morning. I need to be praying for our service earnestly every day and earnestly bringing to Him specific names of people that God could do a work in, including myself, but everyone who comes to my mind. So right now I want to talk to you about a couple different prayers. And we're going to kind of go through, and this is going to be interactive. It wasn't just interactive for resolutions. You didn't get off the hook. You're not done. I'm going to ask you to join me in doing some prayer walking. And the first prayer that we're going to do together is we're going to earnestly pray for our church. And so I'm going to ask you if you would be so kind as to gather into smaller groups of maybe 3 to 5 people. It doesn't matter. But get into groups, and we're going to spend just a couple of minutes praying for our church. And your group may think of some people who are here or who aren't here, and that's okay. You can pray for them. Maybe there's somebody that you know is associated with this church who hasn't been here in a while, or maybe who is really struggling. Or maybe it's one of you and you need to ask the others to pray for you. But I want you to spend a few minutes in earnest prayer to our God about those needs. And so we're just going to get up and we're going to move around and we're going to spread out and we're going to find groups to pray in. And we're just going to have the prayer, the murmuring of prayer, an earnest prayer time right now.